Hello and welcome back to another of your favorite Nordic CEO stories, brought to you by the She Community. I'm your host, Matt C. Smith, and this morning I'm joined by a leader who's living a bit of a double life. When he's not running an 80-year-old building collective with 50 billion NOK in assets, he's helping to put the roof over the heads of 390,000 people around Norway. Could he be the real Bruce Wayne by day and Batman by night? I'll let you be the judge of that one. His name is Daniel Sjoberg Siraj. He's the CEO of the non-profit property giant Ubos. And to be honest, he wouldn't have any time to be Batman because he's too busy reading terrible spy novels and listening to terrible country music. Daniel, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Nice being here.
Cheers. Daniel, the famous first question we always ask all of our favorite Nordic CEOs is, what do you have for breakfast?
Oh, this morning I had some cereals, a small bowl because my wife tells me to eat less and train more. So she trains me a lot. So I eat a very small bowl of cereal with milk and some homemade apple jam.
Homemade apple jam. Are they apples from the garden?
No, from my aunt's garden.
Okay.
I live in an apartment, so I don't have a garden. I just
okay.
live on the 6th floor in a inner city apartment.
Nice one. Like many of us and like many of you listening to this right now. Now, I know that many of you listening to this might know, or maybe you don't know, that you might be living in a home that was built by Ubos or managed by Ubos, or you might even be renting from Ubos. But Daniel, how do you start your day? Are you a morning person or are you an evening person?
Oh, I'm definitely an evening person. I like to get up as late as possible. So this morning I woke up at, I think it was 10 minutes to 8. So because my kids, I live just a short walk from school. So my youngest kid, he doesn't need much time to get up and get out to school. So I try to get as late as possible every morning to sleep in.
Exactly. And I mean, how do you manage that running a massive company like you are?
Then you just work late in the evening. So it's just about balancing your day, working at the evening and then sleeping late in the morning. It's just the day has its number of hours and just use them as well as you can.
So you're a bit of a night owl.
Yeah.
You know, I'll tell you a fun fact. Did you know that Winston Churchill actually started his day in bed? I mean, he started his morning meetings in bed. Apparently, he would stay in bed until lunchtime, and then he would finally get out.
Oh, I'm not that bad. No, I'm not having my meetings in bed.
Well, I don't know. Maybe with the new work from home or work from anywhere, there's a few CEOs that are having calls in the bed, I'd imagine. But Daniel, I want to talk a little bit about your past, mate, because, you know, you've had a really interesting CEO journey or journey to become a CEO, right? Because with this show, we've identified that many of the CEOs we speak with, some of which were born CEOs, had CEO parents, many of which didn't. It's almost like an equal divide. And there's no sort of trait in an individual from birth that really identifies them as a CEO. Because, I mean, you had pretty humble beginnings, didn't you? You know, you grew up in a small town, Moy, 2,000 people, Pakistani father, worked in a factory, Norwegian mother. What made you believe that you could become a CEO?
I never dreamt of being a CEO. That's the first thing. I just dreamt of changing the world. That was what I dreamt about. When I was a small kid, I dreamt about saving endangered species. When I was a bit older, I was very into working with third world problems and how to help developing countries through their problems and trying to solve that. I was engaged in politics and that was what I was burning for. And then I wound up in politics and I never dreamt of being a CEO. I just having fun and be doing the things I'm interested in. And
take me back to the beginning then. So, you know, you grew up, so you were born in Norway.
Yeah.
Grew up in this small town, 2,000 people. You must have stood out, of course, right? You know, this is in the 60s, I guess, in the 70s.
I was born in 1975, not 60s. I'm not that old.
Not 60s.
No, I'm not that old. but
Busted.
But the nice thing about that time is that you really didn't stand out because I have all my family, I have my cousins and all my family on my mother's side in this little village. So nobody ever thought about us as standing out as being colored, having this colored skin. So we were just a part of the fabric of the local community, and that's how I grew up. I never even reflected on my background and the color of my skin. I was just more preoccupied by being overweight than being bullied for being having a colored skin. So it was just a very harmonious upbringing. I think it's a small community based on. There's a huge window factory, very labor class oriented. A lot of farmers, and then you have this low church background. With this is the Bible Belt of Norway, so you have a lot of churches. So this combination of church, factory workers, and farmers, they have a very strong work ethos, and I think that's the most significant part of that.
And actually, what I meant by standing out was the religious element, because you grew up in quite a religious household. You were born into sort of missionary household, weren't you?
Yeah, and so we were, when I was 5, we moved to Pakistan for 2 years, and my parents worked as missionaries there and worked with very ordinary people, the poorest of the poor people in Pakistan, in the slums and in the villages far outside of the big cities. So that's what my background was, and it was a very good community growing up. It's a very tight knit community. So the values are still strong in me from my background.
But that's an interesting story there, because obviously having grown up then in wealthy Norway, right, one of the highest living standards globally, even then it was still up there. You know, that was the beginning of the boom from the oil industries. So everyone was doing well, very socialist. And then you move to Pakistan, right? And you've seen the disparity in human beings and life. I mean, you mentioned how you lived your life with vision and lived your life with a purpose, right? Is that where you gained that purpose? Was that an influence that you sort of...
I think that's what I grew up with. My parents, I've always been willing to sacrifice their own good on behalf of other people. So they moved out, no salary to speak about. It's their calling to change the world, and that's how what we talked about at home, and that's what they still do. 45 years later, they still work with immigrants here, spend their time with them there's no profit motive at all. It's just about being the good neighbor that we brought up with doing, and I think that's been a very strong motivation in my life, and to take that. And that's what my mother's always told me, and my father: use your position to do good. Whatever you are, and wherever you are in life, you don't live for yourself. You live to do well, to do good to other people. And of course, you have your own ambitions. And I'm no saint, so of course I have my own ambitions. But at the same time, being driven by a motivation not of your own profit or your own career only, but to do good. And I see that clearer the older I get. That's my purpose in life, to change the world for the better.
Is that sort of what is your core driver, having a purpose and having an impact?
I think so. That's what motivates me, and I got asked in another podcast the other day, why are you an Obos? Why don't you change and go somewhere else? You're a successful businessman. Couldn't you earn more another place? And I talked also that with my kids, and they told me, you can earn more another place. You're not that well paid to be a CEO. And I thought, I'm well enough paid. But what drives me is being able to combine the business. I like doing business. I like doing good deals. I like earning money for the company. But at the same time, being at a place in a company where purpose is so strong part of the value proposition. And that's what's actually... We couldn't go out from a day, or I couldn't leave my career as the CEO of Obos if I didn't have impact outside of just making profit and doing more on the business side. We have to do something more.
So how do you measure success then? Because you just mentioned, obviously, of course, a lot of people measure salary as success. A lot of people measure their title, how quickly they rise through the ranks. What do you measure as success? Because you mentioned you're not too worried about salary as long as you can cover your bases. But yeah, what is success? What is success to you, Daniel?
To make a footprint. So when I leave this position, or every year when I do my counting, I've done something we build more homes. That's the primary purpose of Obos, is building as many homes as possible for our members. So if we do that, we for the 5 years I've been CEO, we've built 17,000 homes. That's what we did in 10 years during the really heydays of OBOS in the 50s and 60s. So we've really ramped up housing production, and that's core purpose of what we do. I'm proud of that achievement, what we've done together as a team. We've introduced new housing models to bridge the gap for people entering into the housing markets. That's something I'm really proud of, being able to deliver together with my team. And we've invested in communities, several hundred million over the last few years, to do something good, whether it's a small sporting club or the opera, or whether it's helping the civic community through this Corona crisis with economic aid or some other aid. That's something that makes me proud, and I know that part also ticks off with my employees. That's what make them proud, and that's why a lot of them want to work in Obos and not another place.
We've seen a lot of companies pivot during this Corona time. You touched on it there. Orbis is in a very unique position as well, because obviously in real estate and property, and people need a house over their head, right? Like I said, you're 390,000 members.
No, 490,000 members.
490,000. Wow. Okay,
Yeah,
I read somewhere wrong then.
Yeah, you used an older annual report. It was 5 years ago.
There you go. 5 years ago. Okay, well, you've grown 100,000 in 5 years, so well done to you. So 490,000 members across Norway and the Nordics as well.
We are introducing our membership program in Sweden in a couple of weeks. We are only in Norway now, but we're introducing it to the Swedish market. So we're expanding our borders also when it comes to membership. We thought that was why don't offer our Swedish customers the same opportunity to be a co-owner of Obos as we do to our Norwegian customers. So it's basically a question of equal rights to our customers.
So as you're scaling now, for the benefit of those listening right now, I know many of you might be wondering what Obos is, OBOS. I've seen your branding all over Oslo for years now, so I'm quite familiar with your organization. But Daniel, what is your pitch of Obos? If you had to pitch Obos right now in as short as you could, what would you say?
We're Norway's largest home builders and one of the largest in the Nordics. We manage 250,000 homes. So that's the home of approximately half a million Norwegians who live in a home managed by Obos. And we're one of the biggest member organizations in Norway, where we have approximately 500,000 members.
So what do you mean by members organization? How is that structured?
We're structured as a housing cooperative, just like your co-op when you go and buy groceries at co-op or Pricks or whether there's a cooperative organization. You own you are a member of Obos and you co-own Obos, but you don't get a profit out of that. You just preemptive rights to buy a home and special member benefits, but there's no dividends paid out to our members.
Because we live in a world right now where, the last 50 years, everyone was born with the right to a home, right? I think if when my parents or my grandparents were buying a home cost, 500,000 NOK, right? Whereas now an average home costs 4 million NOK or 400,000 euros, 250,000 pounds, I think is the average cost of a house in London, even higher, which is pricing many people out of the market because salaries haven't increased in line with that. Where do you see the future of the housing industry going? Because I know that co-living and this collective living is something that is growing in Denmark, for example, and a lot of the countries around the world that are very sustainable in terms of how to live comfortably and the future of living. Where do you, as the leader of Obos, 50 billion in assets, the home builder of Norway, see the future of living?
I think you're just to the point. There's the disparity in the housing markets between those who have and those who have rich parents and those who don't have rich parents and are quite new to the housing market. So I think the co-living trend is actually not something people would choose, but they have to choose co-living because that's the only way of living centrally in big cities around the world. You have to share your function and live very minimalistic. But if you ask people, how would you preferably live? You would preferably live in your own apartment with a little bit more of space. So we shouldn't drive people into living in smaller homes just because the economics. That's how the drive is. So what we have tried to do is to reinvent our business models in order to accommodate for bringing more and more people into the housing market through taking shared ownership schemes that you have in the UK, that is government sponsors in the UK, but in Norway we do it on our own balance sheet. We do what we call Obos-bostad, that is that where we reduce the price of the home with 10 to 15% and have the right to buy it to the original price when you leave. So you get price rise on what you bought, and our profit is the price rise on the part you didn't, on the rebate. So it's a way of being curious about new business models, and I think that's something we as a business have. We can't just point to the government and say that you have to solve the problem for ordinary citizens. There's simply not money enough in the public accounts to do that, to solve ordinary people's housing problems. They have to do something about the zoning. I could talk for hours about that, but
we won't do that now.
No, but what I think very strongly is that we, as a business community that work in the housing industry, have to take our responsibility and not only point to the government. And when we do that, we can rightfully point to the government and ask them to do something afterwards. But you have to put yourself.
So co-living is potentially the future. And for those of you who are curious about co-living, I know there's a couple of cool brands you should check out. I know there's a new one called Podium in Oslo, which is doing a co-living concept. There's one called LifeX in Copenhagen. Do you have any initiatives set up with Orbos in co-living?
We are looking on that now. We're building building a living lab.
Living lab? What's living lab?
We are building an apartment building with 35 homes where we are testing all kind of co-living concepts. We are testing technology. We're testing technological material solutions, and we try to make that a living R&D project that we are having our own staff. We are engaging partners from the business to try to be curious and explore the opportunities that can arise and the challenges, because everybody talks about co-living and living together in these huge communities as something that is good for everybody. But we have to test it, because when you do one project and one project and one project, that's okay. But if you're going to scale it, you actually have to be curious. What happens? How is interaction actually between? How do you have to adjust the homes and the shared functions to accommodate for privacy that everybody needs to the need of sharing, and what do you need to share?
Because that's the worry with co-living. Because obviously, I mean, for those of you listening right now thinking about co-living or what is co-living, how does it work practically, right? It's basically you share, for example, facilities. So you share large kitchen spaces. You can often also have your own, but you don't have a house with 200 square meters or 400 square meters, right? Because there's so much unlived space in that, right? It's just effectively dead space. Of course, it's nice to have in a big garden, but it's things to maintain. It's inefficient because it needs to be cleaned. It needs to be lit. It needs to be heated, especially in countries like Norway, right? Electricity isn't cheap, and we're living in a nation and a world where, cities are growing from the inside out. And to allow us to live in sort of collective living, maybe up until you get to families of up to 5, it can make a lot of sense, right? So we're seeing that now start to sprout its roots around the world. It's not caught on yet, but it's good to know that Orbos is doing some things in that space. But Daniel, I want to jump over now. This podcast is focused very much on leadership. And you're definitely a loved leader. We had our call the other day, and it was like chatting to a friend. There was no, you weren't some CEO that I had to sort of put a tie and suit on for. Very easy to talk to, fun individual, right? How do you see the CEO role in today's world? I mean, you're a fun, cool guy. Obviously, you are exceptional at what you do because you run an enormous organization, a non-profit to add, which is almost more pressure than a commercial company because, commercial companies are impacted by market trends, but a non-profit needs to survive it all. So my question is, firstly, what is a CEO in 2020?
I think you have to be good with people, and that's and you have to focus on your people skills, and that dawns more and more on me that in order to, and more and more a communicator, because in huge organizations you have to point to the direction. You of course you work with a team, but people look, and especially during this crisis, they look to me as their leader and to point the direction and to give them safety. We had a lot of meetings, and you could always talk about. And then I got a lot of feedback from ordinary employees that they just felt safe about talking about the problems we were in, the possible need for layoffs in part of the industry, just talking very honestly. So you have to have a very presence near people and not just being running around in conferences and talking about housing and sustainability and whatever on your own agenda. So that's what I miss during this crisis, where I can't be around, because I like to talk to people. I think that's one of the in my perspective, it's important to be that people, and that comes in very different forms and shapes. Not everyone has to be an extrovert like me. I think that people can be very different, but in their personality type. But they have to come forward as interested in people, because that's what motivates people to work for you. If you're interested in them, they are motivated by what you do, for the direction you want to set forth on. And I also think leaders today have to have a very strong vision for change, because the world changes so fast that you can't just be a management person that manages what is left to you and just pass it on in basically the same shape as you did, just a little better. I think the changes are much faster, and you have to be more curious than the generations before on new trends, new things shaping the industry. So that's my two main points: people focused and change oriented.
Because if we went back to the beginning, your journey, growing up in Moy, a small town, spent a bit of time in Pakistan, religious, cultural upbringing, right? And then you worked in the world of politics, as you mentioned, became a lawyer for a period of time, and then ended up in a non-profit real estate giant, building and putting roofs over people's heads. What would you say that in that journey were the greatest lessons that you've learned, which have been the most impactful on your leadership role?
It's just the reason why I'm where I am now is, and that I tell that to young people all the time, is you have to take the opportunities that comes. When people point to you and say that you can manage, you probably can manage, because when somebody else above you, I've been given great chances to develop myself through my former leaders, from my leader in politics, a woman called Ann-Katrine Tornås, who gave me a lot of responsibility and a lot of faith with a minimum of competence. And then I was given the same opportunity. My former boss, Martin Mæland, who was the boss of Obos for 33 years, he just took me into his office. I was quite a young man, and he told me, "Daniel, I think you have to choose between going into the direction of business or law." And then when the CEO of the big company tells a young man who was 32 years, that looks you into the eyes and says that he believes in you and he believes you can have another career, you just, okay, sir. And then he actually to take that challenge, and I try to take that into my leadership too, to challenge young people to think over their career and to take the opportunities that arise, but also at the same time this confidence and this trust that you can build, that it is safe to fail. And somebody will cover you when you do your errors, because when you're young or old as me, you will do your errors, and then you will have to have this level of confidence within the organization, this trust that we have started talking a lot more about internal trust in our organization now, because when you have to do changes, you don't have the correct answer. You just believe that something is right. And you have a certain level of certainty. And if people around you can work with a level of trust, they will, and they don't have this. I read this book, The Fearless Organization, and it's caught on. I ordered all my executives to read that book, because it's about eliminating fear as a factor, because they will take up problems very early. It will allow people to fail, and I don't think it's okay to fail, but it's okay to fail if you learn. And if
Exactly.
you can
That's the key
readjust,
point
because
there.
that's a huge difference between just saying, okay, just fail fast and then move forward. I'm not a fan of that. Fail, evaluate, and move forward.
That's a good point to transition onto the company, which is Urbus, right? And you're a leader of Urbus. How many thousand employees do you have? You're
We have
under 3,000, I think.
2,650, I think we are now.
2,650 people. How do you manage a team of that scale, as well as the fact that you also have to manage your members, right? How do you approach managing a team of that scale?
You have to have very good executives and leaders around you on all kind of levels. You can't have control of everything. So I was given advice by a former a senior former CEO that, oh, you have to control everything. That's old school. I think you can't do that anymore. You have to trust people, and then you have to. I'm very closely to my executives. We meet every other week, sit down for an hour. Every Monday, my schedule is packed, and they give me their version of what's important in their business area, and then I try to follow up. But you can't control everything. You have to trust your people, and you have to lead through others and have a culture of leading through others. That's the only way of changing such a huge organization over two different geographies, very different type of businesses. So you can't understand everything else. So you have to recruit your experts on that.
There's a saying which is culture eats strategy for breakfast. And we've seen a lot of organizations that have done exceptionally well, maybe didn't have the best strategy, but just had a team that was so tightly knit and so behind the vision of what they were doing that they achieved and overcame every hurdle that they ever faced. Would you agree with that statement? Culture eats strategy for breakfast?
Yeah, to a certain part, but there's without strategy, there might not be a culture, because we worked a lot with strategy too, trying to make the strategy a part of our cultural journey. I started out 5 years ago. We've grown tremendously for the former 33 years, and I was new. And what do I do for a change to make my entry? And then we started with our strategy, working with our vision together with all our employees, trying to involve them in our strategy process. And that also builds culture, because it builds a culture of being empowered and being a part of the story. And now we're doing the same, taking the strategy inclusion process even further. We're having a top-level strategy, but now we're working with every business unit how to. I got this great photo with our factories workers in Sweden having a lunch session discussing strategy. What does that mean for us? And when you do that, you can combine strategy with culture and make people proud of being in this. They see that they're an important part of this huge organization. They have an impact, even though they just make modules in the forest of Sweden. They're still hugely important to us.
That's good that you have that value through and throughout across the organization. Everyone understands that they're all part of a bigger picture here, and that bigger picture is actually a positive contribution to society, right?
Yeah, I think that's the other part of what we call the Obos culture. I think that's that purpose-driven culture, and I think that went through what we discovered during this first strategy process. This is the one common thing we have, from CEO level to factory worker level. That made the hearts burning. That passion for doing good and being changing society, and that actually we changed our vision to encompass that, to building the society of tomorrow. That was actually not my idea. It came from a broad spectrum of employees from Norway and Sweden. That's a great change, actually driven by the organization itself, not the top level or the board.
Came from inside. Obviously, you're doing something right. Before we move on to equality, how we always like to end these sessions, but I would love to ask you, we all get told time and time again, and I know you listening to this have heard this comment too, that the greatest investment you can make is in yourself. So Daniel, what is the greatest investment you've made in yourself over the last, 30-year career that has shaped you as a leader?
The greatest investment in myself, having a fantastic wife. and a fantastic
Behind
family.
every great man is a greater woman,
Yeah,
they say, right?
because but just I met her over the internet. She's from Denmark, so I went over the hurdle of actually internet dating. At that time, nobody did it, and certainly not my friends. And it was kind of now it's common, but back then, 13 years ago, it was not that common. And we married after nine months, and it's the best investment
Wow.
I did. Those plane tickets to Denmark, early bird flights, and then the internet subscription. So it's given me the balance in life. She's somebody I can come home to. I think it's given me different purposes. When you have your kids, I work a lot, but then you have your things you have to complete. You have to be a part to share. I've been the trainer of my kids for football teams for all those years, and now I'm stepping down, but still being involved. It gives you some different perspectives. You meet kids I live in the inner city of Oslo. You meet kids with a very different background from your own, so you get constantly reminded of who are you really working for as the CEO of Phobos. You're working for every ordinary citizens, and not only ordinary citizens, but also citizens that are not as well off and as privileged as us.
I love that. We'll put that down to good partnership. I certainly agree with that. My girlfriend Hannah is a fantastic partner for me. But we'll save that for another podcast, Daniel. We'll save everyone listening for that. But I wanted to make a point about that, actually. That's the perfect transfer there. About, I read a review, a Harvard Business Review recently, that spoke about your cultural upbringing and cultural heritage impacting CEOs' leadership. Now, you just touched on it there as well. Being exposed to diversity in cultures shows you that you're working and leading for everyone, right? This research showed, and this is an element because this podcast is also, and she works very tirelessly towards gender equality and diversity, right? The research has shown that cultural values are deeply rooted in individuals with cultural backgrounds. So immigrant parent, growing up, I'm an immigrant as well. I'm born in South Africa, grew up in London, lived in Norway. Now I'm coming at you live from Barcelona, Spain, right? Who knows where I'm from, right? Nobody's guess. The data show that they did a study on CEOs of banks in the US that were children and grandchildren of immigrants over the years. And they were on average associated to 25, I think it was almost 25% higher associated performance for these companies. And that was unanimous throughout the lot. And it seems that, your religious roots as well grounded you in a way that shows you built a business and a brand around empathy. And what's your views on cultural inclusion in Norway and as a leader?
I think it's hugely important, but as you say, I have my background. I also have my father who's constantly been nagging me about not ending up like him, working in a factory, not being satisfied with your station in life, but just moving on. And I think that's probably why the statistics are as you do, because if they come from like Indian background or Pakistan, they nag their children to take more education, to take your space, because it's also about creating opportunity for yourself. And I think we as leaders and CEOs have to make that space available, whether you're from a multi-ethnic background or you're like in the construction industry. That's why we've taken a position when it comes to equality and gender equality, because we have to make our space open to women as well as men. So and to be able to do that, you have to do something significant and to actually talk about it and not only talk about it, but actually do something about it that shows that it's actually possible.
So I know, and you're very proud of this too, as you should very well be. For those of you listening who haven't checked this out, there is a She Index, which is powered by Ernst & Young, an index of the most equal and diverse companies in Norway. And you're number 3, I believe.
Yeah, and we're working hard to stay there. Preferably being number 1, but I think that's not possible if you have a male CEO. If we had a female CEO, so they have to change me in order to be number 1. If we did that, we probably would be.
But I think it goes deeper in that, right? It's not so much
no,
about
no.
male or female CEOs. It's about the board leadership, having an equal board or close to or as equal and diverse as possible. But I want to ask you that question because you're obviously doing something right. You're third on the list, and well done to you. Everyone give him a little round of applause here. Well done, Obus. But what is equality to you, Daniel?
It's about equal opportunities, and it's about getting access to. For me, it's getting access to talent. If we're going to survive as a business, and for us, it was a sound business strategy. That's why we started this work. We started with sponsoring the women's football 3 years ago. That hugely impacted our image as being an equal opportunity company. So I think that's really propelled us into the foresight of many people, because we took a very strong position on and went into to a quite heated debate with the football, the Norwegian FA, over that, and it was part of a very conscious strategy in order to do something and it's basically about getting access to talent, and that's what we are seeing. We now I have almost the opposite problem. We're getting a lot of very highly skilled women wanting to work with us because we built this brand. And I have to quota in men at certain position at the moment. So my HR department, they are not allowed to hire any more women at the moment because they're only women before. And so doing this actually did something with our level of being able to compete with our competitors. And if you get the best talent, you will win the battle for the future.
But it sounds like what you've done is you've built a brand that was attractive to both genders, but obviously in your instance by sponsoring the female football team, opening up the door to that avenue. Last question, and short answer if you can. Now, some CEOs, hello, CEOs listening to this, will be listening to this, right? What would be your message to them? You guys are third of the list. You're doing something right. We should learn from you. You've given us a little hint right now. What would you say? Hey, guys and girls, this is my best lesson about how to involve equality and diversity in my organization.
Talk about it and do something about it. Not only PowerPoints, but you have to prioritize equality, and you have to take a bit of risk. When you have to choose between two candidates, be willing to take the risk. You do take risks every day in your business. Then you can afford to take risk on a bit unknown. If you lack women in your sector, just take the risk. They will not fail you.
Mm-hmm. I think that's a great way to finish. Thank you so much, Daniel. And that's actually finishing on a high note with what She Community is all about, which is less talk, more action. So, Daniel, I just want to sum everything up for all of you listening to this right now. If you're just bamboozled by the fantastic comments you've made, I'm going to go through my list. Now, I'm terrible at writing, so who knows if I can read my own writing here, Daniel. But number one, Daniel's story, you have a purpose. Lead with purpose. Be interested in people. We've had a red thread of that. I remember Arild Spando of a Mester Group mentioned exactly the same thing. I think that was in a podcast earlier. Go check it out wherever you get your podcasts. Take the opportunity. Trust. Try to instill trust in your organization. We've heard this time and time again. I interviewed the CEO of Microsoft Norway, who spoke so much about Norway's having a unique advantage and a unique selling point organizationally, globally, because you have a culture of trust. People just trust that the job will be done, and they have faith in people. So, let's not shy away from our Norwegian roots and cultural heritage there. Have trust. It's okay to fail as long as you learn and as long as you validate that failure. Your greatest investment is in a good partner, whether it be male, female, whoever they are. Try to find a good partnership, because that goes so true. Partnership is not reserved just for business. Partnership is also reserved for life. And of course, finishing things off with, take your space. Create your own opportunities. Daniel certainly has, and I think many of us can learn from what you've done, Daniel. Thank you for joining Breakfast with the CEO, my friend. Best of luck with Orbos.
Thank you. And, nice being here. Good luck.
Thank you to everyone. Thank you very much. Have a wonderful day, everyone, wherever you are, and make sure to check out our next episode coming out every single Monday. Ciao, ciao.
Ciao,
Thanks.
ciao.